Hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to the Full Moon in Sidereal Virgo Releasing Workshop. For anyone who can't make it due to celebrations, you can always catch the replay, so be sure to do that. You can still do this practice even tomorrow and the next day. So don't feel like you're going to be missing out if you're not doing it this evening due to your own observances. And I'm really kind of excited about tonight's full moon releasing workshop. It's one of my favorite practices that we do here in the group. But for those of you who might be new to the practice, I'm Phaedra. I'm the astrologer and artist of Mystick, Physick, Astrology. And I use Western sidereal astrology to help you reconnect with your soul purpose and remember why you came. And my main aim in doing the videos that we do here in Sidereal Insights and on the Mystick Physick Astrology Facebook page is to provide guidance on how we can use the transiting planets, the energies of the transiting planets, to affect our lives in a positive way. And so I'm always here to kind of give you guidance on how and insight on how things can play out as we experience these transits, and ways that you can use different energies, whether they're challenging or even easy, to further what your goals and dreams are in life. And what I want you to do tonight is grab your pen and paper. What we're going to do initially is kind of run through by rising sign, and excuse me, we are using the sidereal zodiac for this practice. We're going to go through by rising sign and note what house this particular full moon is falling in for each of you and what the themes of that house are. And then we'll talk a little bit more in depth about the Virgo archetype and Virgo themes and how we can leverage the full moon energy that we're experiencing right now to let go of things that aren't necessarily serving us any longer in life, and kind of make space for the next stage to manifest and move us forward. And so grab that pen and paper. If you don't have your sidereal rising sign, you can get your chart calculated for free at mystickphysick.com/sidereal tools. And there is a link that I've included in the video description, depending on where you're watching on. It's either above or below. So grab your chart there and we'll get started. So if you have Aries rising by the sidereal zodiac, we do use the Fagan-Bradley zodiac in this group. This is a 6th house full moon opportunity for you. So work, health, pets, daily routines. This is a good place to address habits and diet and organization and productivity topics. If you have Taurus rising, this is a 5th house full moon for you. And so that would be true love, creativity, romance, children, risk-taking ventures, sports and hobbies, things that you do for pleasure and recreation. For Gemini, it's 4th house. So home and family, real estate, parents, those are 4th house concerns. For Cancer rising, this is a 3rd house full moon. So local travel, local communication, activity that's going to be taking place nearby you, perhaps involving neighbors, siblings, extended family like aunts and uncles and cousins, that sort of thing. And also writing and communication, teaching perhaps. For Leo rising, this is a 2nd house full moon, so this is around earned income, expenses, possessions, money that you earn by the work that you do every day, rather than money that comes to you through other people or through investments that you might hold. And if you have Virgo rising, of course, then this is a 1st house full moon for you. So this is very personal energy and has to do with your sense of self and your self-expression, and also your appearance, your physical body, that how you dress, how you behave in the role that you play in the world. For Libra, this would be a 12th house full moon. So this is much more private, personal, but much more intensely personal, privately personal. The 12th house rules our unconscious mind, so this can potentially have to do with beliefs that you hold. It also has to do with retreat and seclusion. when we withdraw away from the world. And it's also related to private life and secrets. So that's the full moon, the way that full moon will express for you if you have Libra rising. It's in your 12th house. So for Scorpio then, it's 11th house. And so that's more organizations on the social side of life. Friends, activities that you do for the greater good. So things like volunteerism can fall under the 11th house, and also your hopes and dreams, so your deepest held hopes and dreams. For Sagittarius, it's 10th house, so that's career and professional life, the very most public part of your life, your reputation, rewards, honors, where you get recognized for your achievements. That's the 10th house. And for Capricorn, it's a 9th house full moon, so broadcasting, long distance, international travel, law, religion, higher education, things like that. Hi, Jonna. It's good to have you on. She says, oh, this one is on the 12th for me today. Makes sense. Yes, I was actually thinking about how this one is expressing in my life today. And I was hoping that that we could bring that up and maybe talk about that a bit. Like, what is coming up for you? What are you observing happening for yourself around this full moon in Virgo? And so, yes, I'd like to touch on that. Let me speed through the rest of the signs and we'll circle back around. For Capricorn, we were saying 9th house. So this is publishing and broadcasting, long distance communication and travel, things like that. And then for Aquarius, 8th house. So financial house, but having to do with other people's money, not money that you've earned, but money that comes to you through your partner, through inheritances, through windfalls, bonus or commission income. And it also has to do with debts, taxes, money that you owe other people, so your own financial obligations. And then Pisces, this is a 7th house full moon for you. So it has to do with marriage and business partnerships, your relationships with other people in general, how you relate to other people. And so that's where you'll want to focus tonight's releasing practice. So share with me, if you would, in the comments, and even if you're catching the replay or if you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to share in the comments how this particular full moon has expressed for you. What have you noticed around it? For Gemini rising, for me, that's my sidereal rising sign. This is a 4th house, and it's kind of funny because we have Mercury retrograde right now, we have Jupiter retrograde right now, and I had set all my best intentions for how I wanted to use those retrogrades to kind of move things forward, and plans that I hope I can still pull off while we still have the retrograde active. I want to redo some things with the website. There's some other things that I want to go back and redo on the back end of my business, and I haven't yet taken the time to do that. And for me, that has more to do if I were using the full moon as an expression of my sun sign. But instead, I find myself finishing up some unfinished home improvement projects very heavily involved in that this past week, which is not necessarily what I intended, but as I was reading through our list tonight, I see that that's Gemini, is the 4th house. So that's how I'm actually experiencing it right now. So hopefully the rest of the full moon energy I can use the way I had intended, but still get my home-related projects wrapped up. But I'm curious, Jonna, if you can share what has been coming up for you around the full moon, around the 12th house, or even around, if you're feeling it through your sun sign. That would be an interesting way to talk about the full moon in Virgo, especially while we do have Jupiter and Mercury retrograde, because that does kind of, it puts a particular spin on the energy that we're feeling right now. It's going back and wrapping up unfinished things. It's taking care of unfinished business, and that's been a big expression of what I've been seeing in the last week, for sure. But diving into other ways that we can experience this full moon. So if you want to think back to 6 months ago when we had the new moon in Virgo, so this is back in September, right around the 20th. Something may have kind of taken root for you or started around that time that's coming to an end now. And if that's happening, this is a totally appropriate time to go back and look at wrapping up any unfinished business with whatever that is, especially within 10 days of the full moon, which just took place early yesterday morning. I want to say just after 8:30 Eastern Daylight Time. But talking about the Virgo archetypes. So Virgo represents service, and being the sign opposite Pisces, it's not the selfless service that Pisces represents, but it is the service that we do in the world. It's the service that we do for our fellow man. It's the service that we get compensated for. So it includes the work that we do every day, and work that we do for pay, and those who serve us, excuse me, so our own employees, perhaps pets and service animals, folks that we hire personally. Virgo is also the healer. And so her symbol even, and I don't have an example with you. I might post one in the comments after we're done with the broadcast, but the caduceus of Mercury is a symbol of the service of doctors and nurses. And it invokes Virgo's ruler, Mercury. And the retrograde notation, if you've ever noticed that RX is also commonly used in the medical community and the healing professions. And Virgo herself, in the shorthand that astrologers use, is often represented as an M with an RX at the tail. And so you may come across that in your astrological explorations. And so this is the same shorthand that's used to denote a prescription. And so Virgo, the healer, is very deeply entwined in our medical history and in our experience of the healing profession. Now, in some teachings, though, Gemini, the counterpart, the other sign which Mercury rules, which represents the twins. In some teachings, Gemini represented Adam and Eve, or the male-female polarity. And in that polarity, Virgo can rightfully be considered the expression of the feminine half of that mercurial influence, as opposed to the messenger archetype, the communication archetype, which is Mercury through Gemini, if that makes sense. And Gemini is masculine. But Virgo, as an archetype, Virgo is analytical. Virgo is critical, sometimes too critical, right? And these are expressions that can manifest in positive or negative ways, like all other planetary expressions. So reflecting on that, reflecting on Virgo's domain for a moment, and the archetypes that she represents. She's the maiden, the harvest, the work that we willingly do now, which sustains us in the future, in the unknowable future, right? Virgo represents, in that sense, the reaping of everything we sowed at the beginning of the growing season, and which can be relative to where we are at a certain point in the year, or where we are on the planet, right? So she represents the harvest of previous efforts, and she represents the stowing away of some of that harvest as a security against the unknown future. And so part of what we struggle against with Virgo energy is that unknown future, which we have to come to terms with in order to move forward. Because we can't know it, right? Even through astrology, we think we can know it, but there are innumerable ways any given aspect and any given sign placement can play out. All we can do is get a sense of the themes around it. And so this is, as Virgo represents in that sense, as much of a guarantee as we can possibly have against that unknowable future. And so with those archetypes in mind, I want you to consider where in your life, ideally this is represented by the house Virgo falls in for you, but if you feel drawn to some particular part of life to work with this full moon, you can go in what direction you feel called. But consider where in your life Where can you consciously choose to let go of or release something that's not serving you any longer? And this can be something like a bad habit, something that you catch yourself doing all the time or doing every day. You know, it may or may not be detrimental to your health or your well-being in some other way. Maybe it's an attachment to a daily routine that you have that doesn't really serve any purpose. And is maybe holding you back in some way. A self-criticism. So if you could habitually give yourself a hard time about something, or if you feel like you fail to live up to your own standards or your own expectations, sometimes Virgo is too realistic. And even sometimes a little cold and sterile, kind of like a hospital, right? And Virgo sometimes lacks the compassion in her celestial counterpart in Pisces. But whatever it is, however you feel drawn for this, take a moment to write down on your paper that you brought with you what it is that you'd like to let go, and be as clear and as detailed as you want to be, and write it down. And then we'll take a moment when we're done to thank it and to release it, and we'll step into the remainder of our releasing practice. So everyone just take a moment with your paper. I'm going to find my pen here. This is going to be, I haven't thought about how to use this particular full moon, so this is going to be a surprise for me. That no, right? All right, so let's have a look. I love with the 12th house, especially, Jonna, because it has to do with unconscious mind and our own beliefs. It's a great way to use a full moon in the 12th house if you can identify if there's some sort of limiting belief that you've been carrying around, maybe something that you picked up when you were a kid from the adults in your life, but something that you heard enough times that you've internalized it. If there's something like that that you can consciously identify, this is a wonderful full moon for letting that go. So Jonna says, oh, that's your comment popping up on the browser. The browser's a little slow today. Virgo energy intimidates you. Gosh, I'm not sure what to give you there. Don't let it. I can see how that could be the case, because Virgo can be hypercritical, and it's a very direct power in a sense. It's very no nonsense in some ways. But at the same time, all of that, I think, in a healthy expression of Virgo is, I want to say it comes from an innocent place. It comes from a place of good intentions, if that makes sense. Not necessarily from a place of manipulation or a place of, I'm trying to think of other examples, right, where it could be more negative or less helpful. I think it's, in most cases, if it's a healthy expression of Virgo energy, that directness and that no-nonsenseness is it's all with our own good at heart, if that makes sense. But where we're experiencing the ruler of Virgo in Pisces, that's kind of flavoring this particular experience of it. Pisces is the complete opposite sign. It's the polarity. And the polarities, and some to greater or lesser degrees than others, I particularly think that the Scorpio-Taurus polarity and the Virgo-Pisces polarity are probably two of the strongest. It's kind of a push-pull dynamic, right? There's a tension there. They don't really cooperate very well. And so with it being in Virgo, but also in your 12th house, it's going to feel a lot more like a Pisces full moon for you, Jonna. But it's going to be flavored with that Virgo business-like attitude, right? Of just like get her done type, if that makes sense. And so that's where you're feeling it, I think, a lot in that day-to-day stuff, the practical day-to-day stuff. I'm glad that makes sense. I'm hoping it comes across if I'm communicating it well. Thanks for joining us, Amanda. I know you are having a busy time of things too, so thanks for taking a moment and joining us. And happy Easter, Amanda. I hope you're enjoying the holiday. So we were just talking about the Virgo archetypes and how this full moon is expressing and how we can use it. And so I'll recap a little bit, and while anyone who's on and watching, if you've already caught this part, if you want to go ahead and start writing down what it is you'd like to let go of, go ahead and get started on that. But with Virgo, the archetype that we kind of want to focus on here are the archetypes where Virgo represents service, the work that we do every day for pay, the work that we do in the world that serves other people. Service in terms of those who serve us. So our own employees, people that we hire, our pets. Virgo is also the healer. So we're talking about the healing and health archetypes. So not only our own physical health, but also the doctor and the nurse, those archetypes. And we also want to explore this full moon in terms potentially of the female side of that male-female Mercury polarity. Female being receptive, female being nurturing, also being about the fecundity of the earth, right? Virgo is the harvest sign. And so right now we're talking about harvesting, reaping the results of work that we did months ago, using those resources, stowing away for the unknowable future. And so this is part of what we're exploring tonight. And so with those archetypes in mind, consider where in your life, if you will, that you can consciously let go or release something that's not serving you any longer. And so what we were talking about, Amanda, for instance, is this could be something like a bad habit, an attachment to a daily routine that you might have that might be holding you back in some way. So if you have this habitual thing you do that doesn't really serve any purpose that you could let go of, you know, to make room for something that is more helpful or more healthful or more beneficial in your life. If you have like some kind of self-criticism where you give yourself a hard time habitually, you know, if, for instance, like if you feel like you fail to live up to your own standards or you're just not good enough, like that perfectionism can be something that is very driven by Virgo. So this is an area you can explore. That perfectionism, Jana, for instance, can feel sometimes very intimidating, but often what that is hiding is an underlying fear. And it's a fear of being judged, a fear of failure perhaps, or a fear even of success in some cases. And so I think a lot of like what you find intimidating about Virgo is Virgo's bluster, and it's like that bluster of perfectionism, if that makes sense. But we're talking about Virgo being overly realistic. And so if that's how you're feeling her express, if you're ready to move beyond that, if it's starting to hold you back and get in the way of your own growth and your own potential and your own development, then write down what that is on your piece of paper. Get it all out, what it is that you're ready to be on, what it is that you're ready to let go of. Take a few moments and write it down, and then we'll move on to the releasing part of it. So go kick that perfectionism's butt, Jana. And I'm gonna, let's see, Gemini, 4th house, what am I ready to let go of and move beyond? I'm gonna dive right into my releasing here. I was going to tell you, I have a link. I've shared it once before in the group. I'll share it maybe in the comments. I've mentioned in the past how cool it would be to like have music, right, to kind of get a little ambiance. And so like for you guys to, you know, do whatever you need to do to get your space ready, to kind of prepare your space and make it comfortable for you. So there's this really cool website where you can stream like ambient sounds. And there's some really neat different atmospheres that you can create with some of these ambient sounds. And so I'll share it in the group so you guys can explore it and maybe pick out something that appeals to you to use during like the new moon and the full moon live streams when we're doing these kind of more personal exploratory practices. It's kind of fun. I've been using it myself, and I've really been enjoying the moods that I can create with it. But I'll shut up now so we can write anyway. Does anyone need a few minutes longer? If you do, let me know. Okay. Here we are. You're good to go. Awesome, Amanda. I think I am. I wasn't thinking about this being in my 4th house. I think I've gone the right direction. So something I wanted to talk about this evening in terms of lunar practices. So this is all very kind of seasonal and cyclical. It's part of the natural rhythm of the lunar cycles, that a cycle begins, 6 months later that cycle ends. And then there's a period of rest. Just like in the spring you plant, you have a 6-month cycle of growth, you harvest, you have a 6-month cycle of rest, and then the cycle repeats all over. Well, we experience this every year. We experience this repeated throughout each sign of the zodiac. And we experience it repeated throughout each house in our chart as it happens in the signs of the zodiac. And so we haven't really talked about that a lot on these broadcasts, but I kind of want to bring it up to get you kind of thinking along those lines as you're deciding how you want to work with the full moons and the new moons, what projects you want to initiate, what things you want to wrap up and bring to conclusion so that you can move on. So as you wrap up and bring things to a conclusion, you go into kind of like a dormancy phase where you get the opportunity to take a break in that area of your life before the next new moon happens 6 months after the full moon, right? So that's kind of the general process. And what got me thinking about this is Virgo, right? And Virgo and the harvest. And so that cycle of growth and harvest and then, you know, the winter dormancy period. So I was thinking about it in terms of seasons. And so I want you to really start thinking about, as you go into your new moon intention settings and as you go into your full moon releasing practices, think in terms of that bigger, longer term cycle. Just as much as you might think of smaller, more detailed projects that maybe don't take quite so long to bring to fulfillment. Because that can help you guide the bigger waves in your life, the longer term trajectories in your life when you approach it that way. And that's not the only way that you can approach it, but just kind of something I want to stir up into your brain while you're thinking about these things. As if you don't have enough to think about already, right? So with your releasing, so I'll share my example here. This is a 4th house expression for me. So I was thinking in terms of like the growth and development of my own home, the place where I live, my property. I've spent a lot of time and energy focused on developing my businesses in the last couple of years. So like last summer, for instance, I didn't do any gardening. We had a ton of tomatoes and garlic and green onions that come back like year after year after year. So, I mean, I had some fresh things coming out of the garden, but not a lot. And I hadn't gone out that spring and done any real planting of any sort. And I really missed it. I used to, up until last year, I would plant every spring, and then I would make a commitment that I would take the weekends away from working in the house and in my office and in my studio and go outside and spend them in the yard, in the garden, get out in nature and just kind of enjoy working with the plants, right? And I really enjoyed that. I really loved it. I didn't do it last year and I really missed it. And I'm ready to let go of that. And I don't know if that is letting go of a sense of feeling obligated to work all the time or being chained to the desk workaholism. I don't know if it's that. If it is, okay, let's get rid of it, ready to get rid of it. Because this year, what I'd love to do is open up that energy back up in my home and in my experience of my home, to do, you know, the gardening and growing flowers and planting new things, to watch them grow, and spending more time outside and spending more time enjoying the fruits of labors, right? Because we don't live to work, we work to live. So let's see. I'm going to back up and see some comments here. Amanda says, I'm so new to this, so the houses and all that are still a little confusing to me, but I'm learning as I go. If you can recommend any books to help beginners, let me know. Absolutely, Amanda. I have some books I can recommend for beginners, and I would definitely suggest, if you haven't yet downloaded the Quick Start Reference Guide from the website, grab it. Do I have mine here? This is my copy. I keep it in a little plastic sheet because it sits on my desk for like the whole year before I place it. And I just print it out double-sided, and I keep it in this clear plastic protector. But it is a quick reference to go to kind of refer to what energies are represented by planets, by aspects, by houses, by signs, just to kind of give you some keyword prompts to think about when you're trying to understand a little more deeply how things might be affecting you, or how they might be expressing in your life or in your natal chart, you know, if you have your natal chart out and you're looking at that. But this can kind of give you a little bit of insight, and it can help you, like if you're super, super new, it can help you learn the terminology a little bit too. It doesn't really cover all the terminology that we might use, but it covers a lot of it and what we would probably talk about most commonly. But I'll think on that. I know I have some suggestions I could pass on for books for beginners for sure. So I'll maybe post some links to some. And I know even like the pinned post in the group itself has some reading recommendations. Those might be a little more advanced than more beginner, though I can't remember. It's been so long. I should read through that pinned post and refresh my memory about what it says. Jana says, some of mine release weird, old and unhealthy patterns, habits, and beliefs that I absorbed in my childhood and carried with me. For example, a simultaneous fear of success and failure, and beliefs that I'll always be poor or unhappy, releasing the family curse mentality. Yes, sometimes the wounds that we need to heal are generational in nature. That's an excellent thing to touch on there. Also, the stuff I hide, 12th house, that's an expression of 12th house that probably needs to be released. Yes. An interesting way of looking at the 12th house, Jana, and this might give you a little bit of insight here. So the first house represents the self, right? The ascendant specifically, representing the physical body, and in some chart and house systems, the ascendant marks the beginning of the first house, right? The beginning of the self. The 12th house being behind the first is positioned in our blind spot, both literally and metaphysically. It is behind us. It's what we can't see. It's what goes unacknowledged and unrealized and unseen. And so, yes, when you talk about stuff that I hide and stuff that I bury, sometimes it's even that stuff that we hide and bury so well that we deceive ourselves about its very existence, right? But it's what's in our blind spot. So we have to make a conscious effort to look at that more closely. And doing this with the 12th house full moon is the perfect opportunity to do that. And as you say, well, that is getting way deep. It is. It's getting way deep. I'm glad you like that reference. Very easy to read and understand, the Quick Start Reference Guide. I updated it a couple times. I added, when I first released it, it didn't have the orbs on the aspect, and I wouldn't normally include the orbs. I had a request to do that, and it kind of made sense, especially for beginners. Every astrologer has their own preference around what orbs they use for what. So don't take those orbs as a hard and fast rule. Take them more as a rule of thumb. And for some astrological systems, Sometimes a tighter or wider orb is more appropriate or gives you more insight. Sometimes too tight of an orb, you can miss things. Sometimes too broad of an orb, everything looks like it's relevant, right? So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. And so, but I did update it with the orbs if you didn't notice that. And then every year you want to log back into the website and get the new one, because I update where it has the retrogrades and the eclipses. I update those dates for each new calendar year. And then also the sidereal and tropical zodiac ingress dates. They can vary a little bit from year to year by a day or so. And so I update those for each calendar year too. So that way, if you want to make sure that you're always using the most current one, I update those and then I post them on the website. So if you've registered for an account, you can just go get the download, re-download it, print it back out. Amanda says, I'm releasing fear of failure. I have a weight loss surgery coming up, and while I'm excited, I've never been thin, so I'm afraid of who I will be throughout this journey. And that's a very important thing to bring up, especially with weight loss, because I think that's one that, pretty much we can all relate to. We all struggle with what we see are our own imperfections, right? And we're all our own worst critic, usually about everything, right? And so I think for a lot of us, there's a fear of failure wrapped up in that whole healthy weight and healthy body image thing. And surgery can be kind of a scary prospect. And I wish you luck. I think that's awesome and exciting and a great step forward. But you do bring up a valid point in the I've never been thin, so I'm afraid of who I'll be. It is a self-discovery process as you go on that journey of weight loss. And sometimes as you progress on it, things that you didn't expect to encounter come up and demand to be dealt with. And sometimes I think that's why we sabotage ourselves when we go on those journeys, because we encounter things that we didn't expect to have to deal with it. We're unprepared. We don't want to deal with it. And self-sabotage is an easy way to not have to deal with it. But that's a conversation that I've seen brought up in some of the weight loss groups that I'm in that is interesting, that you don't necessarily consciously think about. You're going to think, oh, I want to look like this, so I'm going to do all these things to lose weight and get healthy or whatever. And you don't necessarily think about all the other stuff that comes with making that choice and going down that path. We're all here for you. So as you go down that journey, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you need help as you go, or if you need just, an ear, reach out to us, because we'll be here for you and be here with you as you go down that journey. And I'm excited for you. Jonna says yes, and so I'm sure that's about what we were talking about earlier. Amanda says, also releasing toxic thoughts that often trigger bad habits. Yes, and one that I've often found is, for me, and I think this has a lot to do with, I have a Capricorn sun, and I have Saturn in my first house, and Saturn can be very critical as well. And so for me, that self-criticism thing, right? That can trigger so many bad behaviors and bad habits when you feel like you're under this microscope, right? Whether it's perfectionism or not good enough or performance anxiety, right? There's ways that can express, that can trigger bad behavior when we're facing that. Jonna says, when things are better here, I would love to schedule a reading with you. That would be wonderful, Jonna. Let me know when you're ready. I feel kind of silly. I tend to have a lot of plates spinning at one time, and the horoscopes that I write are a really big commitment in terms of time. And so I haven't quite got as far on some things around my business as I want to. One of which is the fact that, I have my own website, plus I have the Etsy shop, and I have some things listed on the Etsy shop that I don't even have listed on my own website. I have some things on my own website that I don't have listed in the Etsy shop. So there's a bunch of different types of consultations that you can pick from, but neither place has the full selection all in one spot. And so I'm kind of embarrassed about that. I apologize. If you have questions about what kinds of services are available when you are ready for that, please don't hesitate to ask. I apologize because in that sense, things are kind of a mess, and I haven't had the chance yet to address that, although I do hope that I'll be able to do that, hopefully going into the summer. So we'll see, cross our fingers. If I do get to the point where I have everything updated so that it lines up in both places, I will let you know. So if you don't hear me say anything and you have questions, yeah, because it's not well organized between the two places, just so you know. All right, so let's move on. So we know what we're ready to release, right? John says my sights are exactly like that. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Oh my gosh. I'm glad I'm not the only one, because sometimes like, oh my gosh, you still haven't done that. The same thing on your to-do list for like a month and a half, right? So what we're going to do with these things that we've written down, what it is we're ready to move past and let go of and move beyond, we're going to state aloud our intention to do that to the universe, to God, whatever it is that you believe in, wherever you're drawn spiritually, align it with that for you. But you're going to state aloud your intention to release this from your life and from your experience, no matter what it is, whether it's a bad habit or a belief or whatever, or experience, grief, sorrow. It could be a person that you're ready to release, right? And so I'm ready to let go. This is what I wrote, and I didn't necessarily have the best and most eloquent choice of words here, so cut me a little bit of slack. But I'm ready to let go of stagnation and growth in the growth and development of my living and my property. I'm ready to let go of neglecting my garden and my creative home projects. I'm ready to use what resources I've already accumulated to beautify and restore my home. So I'm ready to move past stagnation in the growth and development of my living space and my property. I think that was the key thing that I said there. I release this stagnation which no longer serves me. So for me, being single-mindedly focused on my business to the exclusion of everything else served me in the moment. It served me for that period of time. I'm recognizing right now that it serves me no longer. And I choose to release that single-mindedness so that I can move this stagnant energy through my home, through my living space, and start focusing on the growth and development of that. That's where I'm taking this. You'll take yours somewhere else, but you'll state aloud your intention in that way. When you release it, I release all of this with my gratitude, because while this was in my life, while this state of being existed, it served a purpose, and it served to move me in a direction I wanted to go. I've just outgrown it. I've moved beyond it. I'm ready for the next stage. And so I acknowledge with gratitude the purpose that this stagnation served in my life. And I release it with that gratitude and with my thanks for those lessons. I release it with love. So what you'll do now, once you've stated aloud your intention, you're either going to burn your paper or tear up your paper. You're going to release it literally in that sense, to accompany the metaphysical, the non-physical releasing, the energetic releasing that we're doing here as well. And so I encourage you, if you're going to burn it, always, always, always do it in a fire-safe place. You can keep a fire extinguisher handy while you're doing it in your sink where you have a water source handy, a fire pit or place. I'm going to do this in my ceramic bowl right here. And you want to burn it completely if you're burning it. But like I said, you can tear it up. You could probably bury it. It's just kind of a symbolic moving it out of your life and moving it to a place where it's not influencing your life any longer. You're letting it go. And remembering, so we do this practice fully cognizant of the fact that matter and energy, right? These are things that they can't be created, they can't be destroyed. So we're releasing this. It's going to come back in some other form. Not necessarily the exact form that we're releasing, but this Virgo energy is going to come back. It's going to be reborn in our lives in about 6 months. We're going to see that happen. Okay? And that will be a new opportunity for a new stage of development and growth, and for taking it beyond where we're leaving it now. Okay? Hi, Elizabeth. It's good you could join us. Excuse me, I'm just going to set. So I should share with you. Here we go. So that's the result of our releasing practice. That's going to go in my flower bed in the morning. But you just want to give it the opportunity to move out. And so one of the things that this does for us, I don't know how many of you might be familiar with principles of, let's say, Hermeticism, right? But there's a principle in Hermeticism, and you might have heard of it in other teachings, as above, so below, as it is on the microcosm, so it is on the macrocosm. That concept, right? The concept of a holographic universe, essentially, is what that is. So we do this releasing practice on the physical plane with an actual piece of paper that we've written actual words on, which we then physically destroy in some way to release on an energetic level what it is we're ready to move beyond and let go of. And what I want to highlight for you is that notion, that principle, that as above, so below principle, that holographic universe principle, that it doesn't matter how long you might have been struggling with this energy, this pattern, this bad habit, whatever it is, this perfectionism, this fear of failure. It doesn't matter how long you've been struggling against it. It doesn't matter how fruitless that struggle may have been or seemed or felt. And it doesn't matter whether you've actually come to a resolution or a solution, or an understanding or an explanation. It doesn't matter at all. As long as you've emotionally reached the point where you're ready to move on, this physical act, which is symbolic in nature, because you're taking action on the physical plane, allows that energy to move on the non-physical plane and finally move and release. So where it's been stagnant and stuck, you can have an energetic shift. So like I was saying, it doesn't matter if you haven't found all the answers. You don't need them. You just need the willingness, and you just need the intention. And having done this, just accept that it's done already. And what you'll experience as we go through the next couple of weeks is you'll witness in your experience of life how that release plays out. It'll just happen naturally. You won't have to do anything. You won't have to lift a finger. And that's because you did all the heavy lifting tonight. And you did it symbolically. And that allows things to happen on the non-physical level and move in the direction that you want. So even if you're feeling like, well, I don't quite get how this works, well, that's kind of the shorthand explanation of how all of this works. And so don't sweat it that you don't have all the answers, because now that you've done your practice, those answers will come to you, and you'll see the movement, you'll see the shift. And take that break. Like I said, you're going to get a 6-month period of rest in the house that Virgo falls in before we see our next Virgo full moon. Allow yourself that time to rest, to breathe, to recuperate. Okay? Give yourself some breathing space. Now, thank you for joining me on the releasing practice, the full moon in Sidereal Virgo releasing. And we were a day late. But definitely, you know, for some reason, if you're catching the replay, if you can't join us because of the holiday, there's still time. The energy is still ripe and fresh to do this releasing practice, and I definitely encourage you to do so. Amanda says, I'm so glad I caught this live. I thank you so much. I'm so glad, Amanda. Like I said, my intent is always to help us figure out how we can use what's going on astrologically in a positive way in our lives, because sometimes it's so easy to get wrapped up in the bad stuff, the hard stuff, the sucky transits, like, oh my God, when is this horrible transit going to end? It gets so easy to get focused on, like, say, the negative aspects of Mercury retrograde. Well, there's a positive way we can use everything that happens astrologically. It just takes a little creative thinking on our part. And so I like to approach it from maybe it's from a more empowered perspective, if that's the word we want to use. I like to give you options that give you power and choice and control over how you experience your own personal transits, because that can help you. That can help you guide your life. Elizabeth says, I'll rewatch my husband. The pages aren't showing up as much in my feed. Yes, the algorithm changes have made a difference, and I do apologize, Elizabeth. I don't know if you are on the mailing list. I did not email in advance. I usually send out an email reminder the night before or the day of the live stream, just reminding everyone to join me, and I didn't do that this time around. I've had